Welcome back to the deep dive. For a long time now, we've talked about medical tourism as if it were just a travel itinerary.
A flight and a procedure.
Exactly. A flight, a procedure, and a flight home. But that model is, well, it's defunct.
It is, completely.
So today we're framing this discussion not as some sort of holiday with surgery, but as what it really is, a highly intricate transnational care pathway.
And one that demands incredibly rigorous governance.
Absolutely. The whole landscape of cross-border healthcare is being redefined. You have this convergence of high-level technology on one side and shifting patient values on the other.
And that's demanding a completely new skill set from medical professionals, from managers, from leaders.
That's the core of it. So our
Right.
mission in this deep dive is to really dissect that convergence for you. We'll
Hmm.
be looking at how innovations, and that's everything from AI and genomics to the operational side of hybrid care, are changing things on the clinical floor.
But with that innovation comes risk.
Monumental systemic challenges. We're talking about equity, sustainability, and this is the big one for me, fragmented accountability across borders.
Yes.
So we really need to know what clinicians and managers must understand right now to navigate this shift. And I am delighted to be joined by Prof. Mo Imam, who understands the operational and ethical gravity of these changes better than anyone.
Thank you. And I wholeheartedly agree with that framing. For anyone in healthcare leadership, the days of seeing medical tourism as a simple revenue stream based on volume.
Just getting patients through the door.
Precisely. That's over.
Right.
The future success of this whole sector hinges on moving towards value, towards demonstrably high safety standards, and crucially, sustainability.
So it's a shift from isolated trips.
To these highly coordinated, often hybrid models of care that really blur the lines between virtual and physical pathways. So the question for any administrator is no longer if these technologies will integrate, but how we govern them to ensure patient safety and maintain that clinical integrity across what are incredibly diverse global jurisdictions.
Yeah.
That is the ultimate challenge.
Okay, let's unpack that. Let's start with the clinical shift to precision medicine. For our audience, we know the definition. It's this move away from the one-size-fits-all approach. But how does this data-intensive model, where you're merging genomics with, say, real-time digital phenotyping, how does that create immediate friction for a destination clinic?
The friction comes from the fact that precision medicine is, by its very nature, intensely data-driven.
It's bespoke.
Entirely. The foundation relies on combining these deep data streams, genomics, biomarkers, advanced imaging, data from wearables.
Right.
So for the medical tourist, what we're promising is a truly individualized treatment option. Maybe it's a targeted therapy they can't get at home.
Which is a huge competitive advantage.
A massive advantage.
Yeah.
But, and this is the crucial part, it necessitates a far more detailed and complex risk-benefit evaluation. We're moving beyond general statistics to building highly individual risk profiles.
And that requires a level of data standardization we just don't have yet.
Precisely.
And this data, it's arriving before the patient even gets on the plane. We've seen the rise of these direct-to-consumer testing companies. 23andMe is the obvious example.
Yes.
Patients are showing up at clinics with their own genomic reports with risk estimates. So if I'm the chief medical officer of a hospital in, say, Dubai, what's my clinical and legal responsibility when a patient hands me that report?
This is where clinical practice meets consumer reality, and the complexity is. It's profound. We have to focus on three critical areas here: clinical validity, regulatory interpretation, and the risk of misuse.
Let's start with validity.
Right. Many of these DTC reports are based on limited variant panels or on algorithms designed for specific populations, often U.S. or European.
So they haven't been validated in the diverse populations you'd see in Turkey or Thailand or the UAE.
Exactly. A risk estimate from a DTC company is relative. It's based on population stats. It's not an absolute clinical certainty.
So acting on it could be dangerous.
It could lead to catastrophic errors. The protocol has to be that you mandate confirmation with clinical-grade testing before you act on any result that seems actionable.
But isn't the patient now king? If they come in insisting on using this data that they've paid for, that's fast, doesn't the clinic have a competitive pressure to use it, even if it's imperfect?
And that's the intellectual pushback we need to have. Yes, consumer satisfaction is vital, but you cannot compromise clinical integrity because of competitive pressure.
The legal risk alone must be huge.
Massive. And that brings us to the regulatory interpretation issue. A genetic variation that's deemed actionable in the EU might be considered of uncertain significance in Singapore.
So you have conflicting standards.
Conflicting global standards. Clinicians overseas must have clear, institution-wide protocols on how to handle this non-standardized data. You can't ignore it anymore, but acting on it without validation is it's unethical.
Which leads to your third point, the risk of misuse.
Yes, genomic labels are highly marketable. There's a real danger of creating this pervasive genetic determinism, where complex diseases are simplified into a single gene that a precise treatment can magically fix.
And that creates completely unrealistic patient expectations.
Completely, especially when it's marketed alongside very high-cost therapies. So managers have to safeguard against this. Marketing material needs to be strictly evidence-based, reviewed by clinicians and by legal teams.
So, given that complexity, what are the concrete safeguards that future models need to integrate to handle this data influx responsibly?
The integration has to be structured. This isn't a consumer curiosity. It's critical, if provisional, clinical data.
So what does that mean in practice?
It means two operational requirements. First, mandatory access to qualified genetic counseling. This has to be a formal part of the pathway, pre- and post-travel.
Supported by telehealth, I assume.
Ideally, yes.
Yeah.
Multilingual telehealth services. The counseling has to address the limitations of DTC tests, manage those expectations we talked about, and translate the data into actual, actionable advice.
And the second requirement?
Secondly, and this is a managerial challenge, we must achieve true interoperability.
The holy grail of health tech.
It is. But genomic reports, imaging, protocols, they have to be securely included in the patient's health record using standardized language like SNOMED or LOIANC.
So that when the patient goes home, their local GP can understand what happened.
And build upon the decisions made abroad. This prevents duplicate testing and ensures critical warnings, say an adverse drug interaction based on their genetics, are carried forward. Continuity is safety.
Let's move from diagnostics to therapeutics. We're seeing huge advances in precision therapies, targeted biologics, cell and gene therapies.
Personalized vaccines.
Exactly. These are often incredibly expensive, and as researchers have highlighted, they can carry very uncertain long-term risks. How does delivering that through a transnational pathway amplify the patient's vulnerability?
It amplifies it dramatically, mainly through what we call regulatory arbitrage.
So a blurring of the lines.
A significant regulatory blurring. Destination clinics might aggressively market therapies, say certain stem cell interventions, that are not yet approved, or at least not reimbursed, in the patient's home country.
Which ethically puts you in a very gray area. Is this advanced care or is it experimental?
That is precisely the question.
Yeah.
Patients, often driven by desperation, might liquidate their assets to access treatments where the long-term evidence base is. Well, it's still evolving.
So the institution has a higher duty of care.
A heightened responsibility for radical transparency. You have to detail the statistical uncertainty, the potential long-term unknowns, and all the financial risks involved. Failure to do that is a critical breach of trust.
And what about the wider impact, the equity concern? Do these high-cost therapies inevitably worsen global health inequalities?
Absolutely. It's a critical concern that policymakers cannot ignore. These therapies overwhelmingly benefit those who are self-funded and mobile.
And while that generates revenue,
it can simultaneously divert the most skilled clinicians, the best equipment, and the focus away from local populations in the destination country.
The internal brain drain?
The internal brain drain, from public to private. It has to be counterbalanced with policy. And then you have the challenge of follow-up.
Of course. Cell and gene therapies need years of monitoring.
5, 10, sometimes 15 years. If the patient returns home after a short stay, that coordinated follow-up becomes extraordinarily difficult.
So what's needed?
We need strong international governance frameworks.
Right.
And we need global registries, secure, standardized databases to track the long-term outcomes for these mobile patients. Without that, we can't truly evaluate the safety and efficacy of these treatments.
They become a high-cost gamble.
Instead of a measured therapeutic advance.
Precisely. That focus on holistic well-being brings us nicely to our second segment. The scope of medical tourism is clearly expanding well beyond the operating theater.
Absolutely.
It's moving deep into the health and wellness sector. We're seeing huge growth in patients seeking preventative and restorative experiences, everything from diagnostic testing with spa therapies to digital detox retreats.
Yes.
Why has mental health specifically become such a prominent driver for this kind of travel right now?
The demand has grown exponentially. And it was largely accelerated by the endemic stress and burnout from the pandemic and, everything that followed.
So there's a real market demand for experiences that address these complex psychological concerns.
and often in environments that are conducive to healing, away from daily triggers.
Yeah.
But for a clinician or an administrator, it's vital to see the different roles these journeys play.
They're not just holidays.
Far from it. They can be primary treatments, for instance, residential programs for addiction or eating disorders. They can be complementary care.
Such as psychological support after bariatric surgery.
Exactly. Or they can be high-level preventive programs, targeting individuals at high risk of chronic disease, offering structured education and support that's hard to replicate at home.
This expansion leads to these integrative medicine models. We hear about places like Canyon Ranch, which combine rigorous medical assessments with complementary therapies.
Acupuncture, clinical nutrition, things like that.
So for the clinical managers in our audience, where should the focus on governance lie in this very lucrative but sometimes ambiguous sector?
The governance must center relentlessly on clinical rigor, on verifiable evidence standards.
Because the risk of pseudoscience is high.
It's the fundamental challenge. It's incredibly difficult for an ordinary patient to distinguish between clinically supported, care-like evidence-based CBT and purely commercial offerings.
You're talking about unproven detox protocols or immune-boosting packages.
Precisely. These are often financially lucrative but lack any scientific basis. And if we allow this segment to grow without rigorous oversight, we risk compromising the integrity of the entire medical tourism brand.
So with that commercial pressure to offer novel therapies, how can regulators implement a clear evidence line? What does that mechanism look like?
Providers and regulators have to collaborate. They must implement transparent evidence standards for all services offered.
So that would involve accrediting bodies defining the scope of practice?
Yes, for complementary therapists, for non-physician providers. You'd need mandatory third-party certification of their qualifications, and crucially, we need enforcement of absolute honesty in marketing.
No exaggerating benefits or downplaying risks.
The moment commercial hype overrides clinical reality, trust is catastrophically eroded. And that reputational damage impacts the core medical sector, too.
Let's shift focus a bit to the journey itself. These wellness destinations often involve long-haul travel, and the resorts consume huge resources, water, energy.
Land development.
Which brings us to a systemic challenge: environmental responsibility. How does the sector balance this high-impact growth with social and environmental accountability?
This is a non-negotiable imperative for long-term viability. We have to move beyond just generic commitments.
Towards concrete, measurable metrics.
Yes. The growth in long-distance travel inherently increases the carbon footprint. So operationally, leadership must adopt what we call tele-first approaches to minimize travel frequency.
Digital coaching, remote monitoring.
Robust pre- and post-stay check-ins. These should replace mandatory physical visits wherever possible. And then there's the facility design itself.
Which must embed sustainability from the start.
From the planning stage. Targeting certifications like ELIDI, focusing on high-efficiency systems, water-saving tech, using local low-impact materials. We need to be able to calculate and report the environmental cost per case.
The carbon cost per case, that sounds like an intense administrative lift.
It is significant, but it's necessary for credibility. Many institutions are now adopting mandatory or voluntary carbon offsetting schemes, sometimes built into the package cost.
But the quality of those offsets matters.
They have to support certified, auditable projects. And on the ground, medical waste management is critical. These centers generate massive quantities of regulated waste and single-use plastics.
So managers need sustainable procurement policies.
And advanced waste treatment technologies. If wellness travel undermines the well-being of the local environment, it has failed its fundamental purpose.
The need for tele-first models bridges us perfectly into our next segment: digital infrastructure. Telemedicine is no longer a niche add-on, it's the necessary infrastructure now.
Absolutely, it's essential.
So how effectively does it serve as that front door for these sophisticated cross-border pathways, especially when it comes to aligning risk?
Telemedicine is now essential for pre-assessment and shared decision-making. It offers huge risk reduction advantages. As that front door, it lets patients get comprehensive pre-travel assessments, crucial triage, detailed second opinions.
All without the cost and commitment of travel.
Exactly. It dramatically improves the patient's ability to decide if travel is truly indicated, and more importantly, if it's safe for them.
And clinicians can use these virtual consults to discuss everything in detail beforehand.
Risks, costs, expected recovery, all in granular detail. This proactive alignment ensures patient expectations are realistic before any major commitment is made.
And it allows you to bring in other stakeholders?
Family members, interpreters, the patient's home country clinician. It promotes that shared decision-making and ensures continuity of care is planned from the very start.
And the digital pathway continues long after the patient has left the facility. We're in an era of hybrid care now. How does remote monitoring wearables, connected implants extend the clinical reach of the destination provider?
Remote monitoring is pivotal. It improves throughput and ensures safety post-discharge. It allows for earlier hospital discharge because patients can be monitored in nearby accommodation or even after they return home.
Using devices that track vital signs, activity, and so on.
Continuously. For example, an orthopedic patient might use sensors to monitor their gait and swelling, allowing a physio to adjust their rehab plan remotely in real time.
So if an early warning sign appears,
A subtle arrhythmia or early signs of a wound infection, the clinician can detect it early and intervene promptly, often through a secure video call. Telerehabilitation platforms are equally vital for this.
but for these hybrid models to work safely at scale, what are the non-negotiable infrastructure requirements? We're talking about critical data crossing multiple national firewalls.
Safety hinges on several factors that require significant investment. First, reliable connectivity, and critically, interoperability.
The systems have to be able to talk to each other.
They must, using agreed standards like FHIR. Secondly, and this is a legal point, there must be clear, upfront agreements on clinical responsibility across borders.
So every phase of the journey has a designated responsible clinician.
A designated licensed clinician and institution. This involves intricate credentialing and often specific cross-jurisdictional indemnity agreements. And without strong data protection, adhering to standards like GDPR, the entire infrastructure of trust just collapses.
Moving deeper into that, let's talk about artificial intelligence. AI's role in generating personalized predictions for disease risk, treatment response. Its potential is immense.
It is.
How is AI being concretely applied in the medical tourism context, both clinically and operationally?
AI and machine learning systems give us unprecedented predictive power. Clinically, they're used for rigorous risk stratification. Before travel, AI can help identify which patients are safe to travel for surgery and which are not.
Based on their predicted complication risk.
Exactly. They can provide personalized outcome predictions for high-volume procedures like joint replacements. Diagnostically, AI is being integrated into automated image analysis, detecting subtle abnormalities faster than a human can alone.
And what about on the operational side?
Operationally, AI is a powerful efficiency driver. It helps forecast length of stay, predict bed occupancy, and tailor staffing needs based on the anticipated international patient mix.
So it's vital for resource management.
Absolutely. And it supports high-tech treatments, integrating into robotic surgery platforms, where feedback systems help surgeons benchmark their own performance against global peers.
But any discussion of AI inevitably lands on the challenge of inherent bias. We know that AI systems trained on unrepresentative datasets can embed and sustain societal biases.
Yes, this is a crucial point.
Why is this risk amplified when these tools are used in diverse medical tourism populations?
It's amplified because an AI system is only as unbiased as the data it's trained on. If an algorithm is trained predominantly on data from one specific group, say, white male populations in North America,
it can systematically fail when applied to a global cohort.
Precisely. Medical tourism populations are inherently far more diverse than many of the source populations used to train these commercial AIs.
So an algorithm might underestimate complication risks for certain ethnic groups,
leading to undertreatment or delayed intervention. If a hospital uses a biased algorithm to stratify surgical risk, it risks failing to accurately assess and safely treat a significant portion of its patient base. That causes measurable harm and erodes global trust.
It's a direct threat to the mission. So what is the non-negotiable governance mandate for any institution deploying AI in this context?
The mandate is threefold. First, the AI tools must be rigorously validated across diverse, multinational populations.
Not just the population of origin.
Correct. Second, they must provide explainable outputs. Clinicians and patients need to understand why the AI reached its conclusion, not just accept a black box output.
And the third part.
Critically, these tools must be integrated into accountability structures that ensure the human clinician and the institution maintain ultimate legal and clinical responsibility. The AI is a powerful assistant, but the liability stops with the licensed medical professional.
That focus on accountability brings us to the foundation of digital trust. Cross-border data sharing imaging, genomics, financial data, it creates enormous vulnerability.
It does.
Data governance, especially adhering to standards like GDPR, is central to credibility. Where does something like permissioned blockchain technology fit into this?
Permissioned blockchains and distributed ledger technologies offer a robust solution for enhancing integrity. They are fundamentally technologies of trust and verification.
So how does that work for data integrity?
A blockchain provides a tamper-evident audit trail for health record access. Every interaction, who accessed a record, when, for how long, is logged in an immutable chain.
Which significantly reduces the risk of unauthorized access.
Exactly. It also facilitates patient-controlled granular consent. A patient can use a secure digital token to grant permission for their imaging to be shared with a specific surgeon for one consultation, and that access automatically revokes afterwards.
That's a huge boost for patient confidence. And what about operational benefits beyond data security?
Operationally, it enhances integrity in high-stakes supply chains, like for pharmaceuticals or devices. It provides an immutable record verifying the provenance of materials like cell therapies.
So you know what the patient receives is authentic.
And hasn't been compromised. More efficiently, smart contracts can automate cross-border payments and insurance claims, which increases speed and reduces the risk of fraud.
It sounds like a powerful technical fix. But you always maintain that technology is not an independent solution. What are the limitations here?
The limitation is that blockchain is an integrity layer. It's not a primary storage solution for huge files like radiology scans.
So it needs to be integrated with reliable off-chain storage.
Yes. If the data stored off-chain is unreliable, the blockchain only verifies the integrity of the pointer to that flawed data. And we have to address the inclusivity challenge. Any digital infrastructure has to be accessible. It mustn't exclude patients with limited digital literacy or those from regions with poor connectivity. We risk creating a new digital divide in who can access this kind of secure care.
We spend a lot of time on the high-tech future, but we can't ignore the systemic challenges that threaten the legitimacy of this whole industry.
No, we can't.
You referred to equity as the most urgent issue. When you have these advanced procedures consolidated in large, profitable hospitals, catering mainly to international patients, what's the danger to the host communities?
The danger is profound. It's the risk that medical tourism becomes a luxury service for the privileged, while simultaneously eroding the capacity of the local public health system.
Through that brain drain of skilled clinicians and resources.
Exactly. It creates social inequality and ethical dilemmas. For host countries, proactive policy responses are absolutely essential.
So governments need to step in.
They must implement measures to formally ring-fence capacity for local patients, mandatory quotas for certain services, for example. Revenue from medical tourism has to be legally earmarked for reinvestment into public health.
What does that ring fencing look like in practice for a hospital CEO, a progressive tax?
It needs to be structural. It can be a levy on international patient revenue that flows into a national health fund. More directly, it could mean requiring an international facility to allocate, say, 20% of its theater time to local patients at subsidized rates.
And to combat the brain drain.
You must ensure local staff receive extensive training and career development opportunities, so the expertise gained elevates rather than depletes the local talent pool. The goal is positive spillover, not negative extraction.
Alongside equity, there's the growing challenge of fragmented accountability. As care pathways become more complex, involving a web of actors.
Facilitators, platforms, AI vendors.
The question of who is liable when something goes wrong feels like a legal nightmare.
It creates a labyrinth of liability that's nearly impossible for a patient to navigate. Imagine a patient has a joint replacement, flies home, and develops a deep vein thrombosis on the flight.
Who's responsible? The surgeon, the flight facilitator, the home physician who couldn't get the discharge summary.
It's unclear. And the patient is left navigating multiple legal frameworks with little path for redress. This requires robust, systemic solutions. We need legally binding cross-border agreements, service-level agreements.
Or SLAs. And what does a manager need to ensure is in that SLA?
It has to explicitly designate the responsible party for specific clinical phases. The destination hospital is responsible for the surgery and the first 72 hours post-op. The remote monitoring vendor is responsible for the data transmission.
So everyone knows their role.
And their liability.
Yeah.
We also have to mandate standardized, comprehensive discharge summaries and shared care plans that are delivered within, say, 48 hours of discharge. And beyond that, we need international mechanisms for mediation and fair compensation in disputes.
Finally, let's talk about accreditation. Traditional bodies like JCI are still influential, but we're seeing new programs emerge, like global healthcare accreditation, which look at the entire patient journey.
Yes, which is a necessary evolution.
So how must accreditation evolve to match these new, complex, value-driven pathways?
It has to move beyond basic safety checks to focus on robust, publicly reported, value-driven scorecards. The framework to look at is the Value-Driven Medical Tourism Readiness Scorecard, or VMTRS.
And that shifts the focus from inputs like, do you have an MRI machine, to quantifiable outcomes.
Yes, exactly. For clinical outcomes, good now means public reporting and risk-adjusted benchmarking. We need to track objective indicators like 30-day readmission rates, infection rates, and crucially, patient-reported outcome measures.
So for an orthopedic facility, that would mean tracking the patient's reported functions 6 months later.
Not just their surgical success rate upon discharge. Yes. Accreditation becomes an operational tool for transparency, not just a badge.
And how does a framework like VLMTRS assess the continuity of care in practice?
It rigorously assesses the entire communication flow. It demands verification that discharge summaries are sent quickly and in a format the home provider can actually use. It verifies if formal shared care agreements truly exist.
So it's validating the hybrid model in practice, not just in theory.
Precisely. And accreditation must integrate new criteria. Mandatory environmental performance indicators, emissions per case, water stewardship, and mandatory assessment of compliance with robust data protection and cybersecurity standards. It acts as a dynamic mechanism for external validation.
This deep dive has really highlighted a monumental transformation. Medical tourism is no longer defined by these episodic trips, but by integrated hybrid pathways governed by data.
A huge shift.
And we've moved from technology as a slogan, AI, and genomics as just marketing buzzwords, to seeing it as essential infrastructure that demands sophisticated ethical governance. If you found this discussion valuable, please take a moment to rate and share this deep dive with your professional network.
I think for the professional community, the clinicians, the administrators listening, the core task moving forward is singular. It's ensuring that every innovation we adopt strengthens the ecosystem of trust. The future landscape of competition will fundamentally shift from being zarely price-based to being rooted in demonstrable ethics, robust transparency, and long-term sustainability. That is the ultimate differentiator.
The burden is now on us to operationalize that trust. Thank you. This has been an incredibly detailed and necessary discussion.
My pleasure.
And thank you for joining us for the deep dive. The promise of this next era of cross-border care lies not just in offering patients more choices, but in supporting them to make better, safer, and ultimately more meaningful choices. And that's a burden that rests squarely on transparent governance and ethical stewardship. We'll see you next time.